The light came before the sun, not bright and hopeful, but thin and gray, like the world was waking up without caring who suffered through the night. The Wyoming land lay open and bare, covered in dust that clung to wood, leather, and skin. The wind that had screamed for hours was gone now, leaving behind a silence so deep it pressed against the ears. It was the kind of silence that came before judgment. Inside a small, rough cabin at the edge of the settlement, Clara Burns slipped from a straw mattress and stood barefoot on the cold wooden floor. She moved quietly, careful not to wake the others. Her body was slight, all bone and will, shaped by hard years instead of youth. Her dark hair was braided tight, the only neat thing about her. She lifted her left hand and looked at it in the dim light. It was swollen and bruised, wrapped in a crude splint made from scrap wood and cloth. Pain throbbed through it like a slow drumbeat. She flexed her right hand instead. That one still worked. It would have to be enough. A large shape snored on the other cot. Emmett Byrne, her stepfather, filled the room even while sleeping. Whiskey clung to him like sweat. In the corner lay Eloise, his wife, silent and sharp even in sleep. Clara passed them both without a glance. They were facts of life, like dust and hunger. She pushed through the canvas curtain into the small lean-to kitchen. The dirt floor was cold, the walls full of gaps that let wind and grit creep in. But in the center stood the hearth, built from stone and mud. It was blackened and scarred, but solid. To Clara, it was more than a place to cook. It was the only place that belonged to her. She knelt and stirred the banked coals with her good hand. A few red embers glowed back at her. She added dry pine splinters and breathed gently. When the fire caught, a small calm settled in her chest. Fire was honest. It took work and gave warmth. It did not lie. She began her morning routine slowly. Grinding coffee beans with one hand hurt, but she braced the mill with her knees and kept going. Pain shot up her arm, sharp and bright, but she swallowed it down. Crying would change nothing. She had learned that long ago. Next came bread. She mixed flour and water in a wooden bowl, pushing the dough with the heel of her right hand. Sweat gathered on her brow. The work was clumsy and slow, but she did not stop. Men would come hungry soon. If they were fed, they worked. If they worked, Emmett got paid. That was the arrangement. As the dough rose near the fire, memories crept in. Her mother's voice, soft and kind, teaching her how to feel when bread was ready. Food is a kind of prayer, her mother had said. Clara pushed the thought away and shaped the loaves, remembering too much hurt. The cabin behind her creaked. Emmett was awake. "Coffee!" he growled from the other room, as if the world owed it to him. Clara carried a tin plate with bread and fat, then a mug of black coffee. She set them down and turned away without a word. Emmett ate loudly, complaining about portions. Eloise watched with quiet eyes and a thin smile. Clara returned to her hearth. Silence was safer than answers. 3 nights earlier, that silence had cost her a hand. She remembered it clearly. Emmett, drunk and angry, accusing her of giving the workers too much stew. She had stood her ground. Hungry men could not work, she had said. His hand had closed around her wrist. The twist. The crack, pain so sharp it stole her breath. She had not screamed. She would not give him that. Now the ache was constant, but she worked through it. By mid-morning, a sound rolled across the land. Hooves. Many of them. Dust rose on the horizon. Men stopped what they were doing and stared. A group of riders came in, strong and steady, their horses moving like they belonged to the land. They were cowboys, 24 at least. Leading them was a giant of a man, broad and solid, sitting easy on a gray horse. He moved with calm strength, the kind that did not need to shout. This was Boaz McCall, owner of the J.M. Ranch. His name carried weight. Emmett rushed to greet him, all smiles and false cheer. Meals were agreed upon quickly. Clara stayed in the kitchen, but soon the work doubled. More men meant more food. She carried heavy platters with one arm. bracing them against her body. Her injured hand stayed close to her chest. The cowboys filled the tables, loud but not cruel. They ate with gratitude, and plates came back clean. Clara kept her eyes down, moving like a shadow. Boaz watched. He noticed the way she held herself, the stiffness, the splint, the effort it took for her to pour coffee again and again with one hand. He saw the sweat, the tight jaw, the refusal to complain. One young cowboy thanked her. She nodded and moved on. When the meal ended, Boaz rose last. He walked to the edge of the kitchen, not crossing the threshold. "This pie," he said quietly, "it makes a man forget the desert for a moment." Clara froze. No one spoke to her like that. She did not answer. He set a sack down near the door. "Good flour," he said, "from my mill." Then he left. Emmett noticed the sack later. His face darkened. Eloise whispered. Something sharp and dangerous settled into the cabin air. Clara stared at the flour long after the fire burned low. She did not know what it meant. Kindness always came with a cost. That night, as the wind returned and the cabin groaned, Clara lay awake with her broken hand against her chest. Outside, the land stayed vast and uncaring. But somewhere beyond the dark, something had shifted, and she could feel it coming. The sack of fine flour stayed in the corner of the kitchen for 2 full days. Clara did not touch it. She worked around it, stepping past it as if it were a sleeping animal that might bite if stirred. Kindness in her life had always come with a sharp edge. A favor was never free. She had learned that lesson young, and she trusted it more than hope. Her days followed the same hard rhythm. She rose before light, built the fire, cooked for hungry men, and cleaned until her back ached and her good hand burned. Her broken hand was healing wrong, stiff and sore, but she forced it to help where it could. Pain had become part of her breathing. She accepted it without comment. Boaz McCall did not return right away. That almost hurt more than if he had. A small, foolish part of her had been listening for hooves, for that steady, calm presence. When it did not come, she told herself she had imagined, meaning where there was none. Then, on the 3rd afternoon, his horse appeared again at the edge of the settlement. He came alone this time. No crew, no noise, just the slow, even walk of his gray horse and the quiet certainty of his arrival. He spoke briefly with one of his foremen near the corrals, then turned toward the cabin. Clara saw his shadow fall across the canvas doorway. Her shoulders tensed. She kept her back to him, scrubbing a pot with steady force. "Ma'am," he said. "Sir," she answered, without turning. He did not step inside. He stayed where the dirt met the wood, respecting the line she had built around herself without ever naming it. "I noticed your lard supply is near gone," he said, like he was talking about weather. "A cook needs clean fat. This is from my own hogs." He set a wrapped bundle down near the flour sack. That was all. No questions, no pity, no talk of her hand. He nodded once and left. Clara stood frozen long after he was gone. When she finally unwrapped the bundle and saw the clean white lard, something twisted deep in her chest. This was not a gift meant to buy silence or obedience. This was a tool given to someone who knew how to use it. That frightened her more than cruelty ever had. The visits continued, always quiet, always respectful. Dried herbs one time, a sharpening stone another. Old baking molds once, shaped like a heart, a star, and a crescent. He told her they had belonged to his mother. He did not linger when he said it. He did not look for sympathy. Clara accepted the items with short thanks. She did not invite him in. He did not ask. But the settlement noticed. Men talked. Whispers slid across tables and campfires. A rich rancher did not ride miles just to deliver supplies to a cook. Eloise listened carefully, storing every word. Her jealousy, long quiet, sharpened into something dangerous. She chose her moment well. Emmett was drinking, his mood sour and slow. Eloise sat close, her voice soft. "People are talking," she said. Emmett looked up, already angry. About what? About Clara. About McCall. They say he brings her gifts. They say he treats her like she matters. Emmett's face darkened. They say it makes you look weak, Eloise added gently. Like you can't even control your own house. That did it. Emmett did not shout. He grew quiet. His rage settled deep, heavy and cold. Clara felt it before she saw it. His eyes followed her more closely. His silence pressed harder than his words ever had. The breaking point came on a night thick with wind and drink. The cowboys had eaten and left. The cabin felt too small. Emmett stood suddenly and stormed into the kitchen. His hand closed around a cast-iron pot and hurled it against the hearth. The crash rang through the walls. He tore down shelves, kicked buckets, smashed plates. He was not just angry, he was erasing her. Clara stood still, holding one of the baking molds in her good hand. She watched her world break apart. Then he found the tin box. He ripped it open and spilled its contents onto the floor. A locket, buttons, her mother's folded recipes. He knew exactly what they were. "Your magic papers," he sneered. Before she could move, he tossed them into the fire. They burned fast. Clara dropped to her knees too late. Ashes lifted and vanished. Her mother's handwriting disappeared into smoke. Something inside her went quiet. Not calm, empty. When Emmett left, satisfied, she stayed there in the dark, staring at cold embers. She did not cry. The part of her that cried had burned with the papers. Morning came gray and thin. Clara was already awake. The kitchen was wrecked, pots bent, shelves broken, the fire small and weak. When men arrived for breakfast, they found silence instead of warmth. "There is coffee," Clara said evenly. "No bread." They understood without being told. Plates stayed clean. Voices stayed low. Word traveled fast. By afternoon, Emmett's world began to collapse. A traveling merchant spoke quietly with men. Debts were named. Notes were counted. Land papers changed hands. Emmett paced, fear sobering him faster than shame ever had. When Boaz McCall returned the next day, the entire settlement went still. He came alone, carrying papers. Emmett met him on the porch, trying to stand tall. He failed. Boaz spoke calmly. Every debt paid, every note purchased. The land no longer Emmett's, the cabin no longer his. "You have until sundown tomorrow," Boaz said. "After that, you are trespassing." Emmett screamed about Clara, about betrayal, about ownership. Boaz's voice never rose. "I paid, so you no longer have the right to cause harm," he said. Then he left. That night, Emmett tried once more to assert himself. He grabbed Clara's arm, expecting fear. He found none. Her eyes were cold and still, like deep water. "Get out of my house," she said. Men watched from the dark. Emmett's hand fell away. Power drained out of him like blood from an open wound. He left before dawn. Eloise followed. The silence they left behind was clean. Clara stood alone in her kitchen and began to rebuild. Not because she had to, because she chose to. And that choice changed everything. The morning after Emmett and Eloise left, the land felt different. The air was the same, the dust still clung to everything, and the wind still whispered across the plains. But the weight inside the cabin was gone. Clara noticed it the moment she opened her eyes. There was no anger waiting in the room, no fear sitting on her chest, only quiet. She lay still for a long moment, listening. The cabin creaked softly as the wood cooled from the night. Somewhere far off, a horse snorted. That was all. She rose and dressed slowly. Her left hand was stiff and weak, the scar still tender, but it moved. It was hers. She stepped into the kitchen and looked around at the damage. Bent pots, broken shelves, scorched stone. The place looked like her life had looked not long ago. She took a breath and lit the fire. The sound of flame catching was small, but steady. She put water on to boil and sat on a low stool while it heated. For the first time, no one would come yelling. No one would demand. No one owned her time. Freedom felt strange. It felt heavy. After coffee, she began to work. Not fast, not angry, just careful. She stacked what could be saved. She hammered dents from pots using an old anvil behind the cabin. Each strike rang out across the yard. The sound drew eyes, but no one spoke. By midday, Jed, the foreman from Boaz McCall's ranch, stood at her doorway. He kept his hat in his hands and did not step inside. "The men wanted to ask," he said, looking at the ground, "if you'd be willing to keep cooking for wages paid to you." Clara considered it. She thought of the long days, the heat, the ache in her hand. She also thought of the quiet nights, the full bellies, the work she knew better than anything else. "I will," she said, "for fair pay." Jed nodded. "That's fair." After he left, gifts began to appear without words. Trout, eggs, venison, apples, not charity. Trade. Respect. Clara cooked again that night. Simple food, honest food. The fire warmed the space, and for the first time, the kitchen felt like a beginning instead of a prison. Boaz McCall did not come that day, or the next. She told herself it did not matter. On the third evening, as the sun slid low and painted the land gold, she heard hooves. One horse. Slow. Steady. Boaz stopped near the broken fence and dismounted. He worked quietly, testing posts, measuring rails. Clara watched from her doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. When he finished, he approached the cabin and stopped at the edge, just as he always had. "Evening," he said. "Evening," she replied. "The fence will need new timber before winter," he said. "I'll send men." "Thank you." He nodded. Silence stretched between them, comfortable and easy. He glanced around the kitchen. "You've been rebuilding." "Yes. It looks strong." "It will be." He tipped his hat and left. No grand words, no promises. Days passed. Weeks followed. The land cooled. Leaves yellowed. Clara's hand grew stronger, though it would never be the same. She learned new ways to work. Smarter ways. One hand braced, the other guiding. Boaz returned often, sometimes with supplies, sometimes just to check fences or water lines, sometimes to sit on the porch and drink coffee while the stars came out. They talked little, about weather, about work, about food. They did not speak of the past. They did not need to. One evening, Clara baked something new. A rough tart with wild mushrooms and goat cheese from a nearby homestead. She used the fine flour. She used the herbs Boaz had brought. She used her memory and her hands. She served it after supper, quiet and unsure. Boaz took one bite and went still. "This tastes like the land," he said after a moment, "and like you." Clara looked down at her hands. "The old recipes burned," she said softly. "I rewrote them and made new ones." He watched her closely, not with pity, with respect. "They broke my hand," she said, meeting his eyes now, "but I'll keep cooking." A slow smile crossed his face. "I believe you will." He did not reach for her. He did not rush. Instead, he looked around the kitchen, the mended pots, the sturdy shelves, the fire burning steady. "This place needs work," he said. "A new floor, stronger walls, a roof ready for snow." She waited. "May I build it with you?" he asked. It was not an order, not a rescue. It was an offer. Clara felt tears rise, surprising and sharp. She nodded once. She held out her left hand, the scarred one. Boaz took it gently, his grip firm and warm. Outside, the prairie stretched wide and quiet. Inside, a home took its first true breath, and for the first time, Clara Byrne was not surviving. She was living.